Freedom in High Heels by Yashika Coley. The women's movement was a social movement largely based in the United States. The movement allowed women to seek equal rights and opportunity for their economic, political, and personal lives. There were two waves of the feminism movement. The first wave was in the 19th and early 20th century. This movement focused primarily on legal rights, such as the right to vote. The second wave of the feminism movement happened around 1960 and 70s. This movement focused more on the area of the woman's life, including family, sexuality, and work. Throughout history, women have been told where their place lies in society. But where did the woman belong? In the home? Of course, cooking and cleaning and tending to the needs of her family. Or maybe not. Maybe the woman's place was in the workforce and her husband's responsibility was to stay at home and take care of the family. Either way, understanding what role women played in society has been one of America's most controversial issues. In the 1920s, women began fighting for women's suffrages. No, really, I mean fighting. In Sally Heathcote, Suffragette, it talks about a housemaid caught up in the feminist movement of the early 20th century. As the desire between men and women grows, the women in the movement break the bonds of oppression through disobedience and violence. Sally played a very important role in the women's movement, as did other women during that time. One of the instrumental supporters involved in the fight for equal rights for women was Amelia Earhart. Born on July 24, 1897, Amelia became the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. Her passion for aviation and her belief in women's rights transformed the woman's image from a passive housewife to an attitude of take charge that revolutionized our world and changed her field. Amelia's take charge attitude transitioned to other women, such as her friend Eleanor Roosevelt, the First Lady of the United States. In the book, Amelia and Eleanor Go for a Ride, Amelia and Eleanor made history together when they decided to fly a plane to Baltimore one evening after a dinner party at the White House. The purpose of the flight was for Eleanor to view Washington, D.C. from the air and at night. But more importantly, it would be the two very outspoken women who were determined to change the way this country viewed women's role in society. Both ladies, still dressed in their evening gowns and high heels, boarded a plane and flew to Baltimore and back without a male being present. A fascinating trip by two women who were destined to change the viewpoint of women in the world. The goal of the women's suffragists and the civil rights movement were similar in the fact that they both were fighting for equal rights under the Constitution. In the book, She Persisted, one of the pioneers in the civil rights movement was a 15-year-old girl named Claudette Colvin. Claudette was arrested for refusing to give up her seat on a segregated city bus in Montgomery, Alabama. Her courage in refusing to give up her seat later inspired Rosa Parks and other women to take a stand against segregation laws. Her courage at such a young age is inspiring. The fact that she stood up against racial inequality became the focal point of the civil rights movement. Colvin Parks, and several other women were jailed and tried for refusing to give up their seats. The case went all the way to the Supreme Court, in which the judges determined that the state and local laws requiring segregation in Alabama were unconstitutional. 3 days later, the Supreme Court issued an order in Montgomery, and the state of Alabama had to end bus segregation. And finally, before the women's movement, before the civil rights, there was Harriet Tubman. In the book Moses, it talks about Harriet and how she was born a slave in 1822. Harriet Tubman escaped slavery with the help of God and the network of the Underground Railroad supporters. Harriet successfully helped free 70 enslaved African American people, many of them being her family members and friends. Learning about the women's movement gave me a sense of pride in the fact that I am proud to be a woman. Women are underestimated. There are so many things that we are responsible for. We bear children, raise them, take care of our families, work full-time jobs, all while pursuing our dreams and goals. When I was in middle school and in high school, there was never a focus on the accomplishment of women. Of course, we learned about Harriet Tubman, Amelia Earhart, and Rosa Parks, but the school system failed to tell us about what the women went through in order to overcome a society that was stuck in America's past. This reminds me of the danger of a single story, only learning about the males and their accomplishment. Of course, we learned extensively about Christopher Columbus and Shakespeare and George Washington. They were all great men. Yet the women's movement and the important women in the U.S. are equally as important. I think these topics should be discussed and studied in school at a young age. This gives young girls options to see themselves in the success of women who have changed this country. The brave women of the women's movement brought about change that transformed the viewpoint and the role that women played in society. Their determination, fearlessness, toughness, and persistence gave all women a chance to seek more than the norm, and it challenged women all over the country to fight for equal rights. Rudine Sims Bishop, a literacy professor, talks about the importance of having diverse books. Diverse books are important as it helps not only children but the adult reader to see themselves in the literature that they read. For me, the women's movement and important women in the U.S. have been a direct reflection for me in opening my understanding about the challenges and accomplishment of the women's movement. These books are my mirror, windows, and sliding glass doors, helping me to understand the past challenges and the future accomplishment of the women's fight for equal rights.